Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to give this talk. I'm not sure if to start in the morning with some science is a good appetite for you, but I was scheduled to do that, so I will discuss the science behind DNA forensic, which is today the highest technological advancement in court. So when we go into a crime scene, it is very important to collect all type of evidence in order to get the case done and clear for the judges so they know exactly what happened in the crime scene. The type of evidence can be either fingerprints, biological samples, footprints, and so on. So if we go to the case of O.J. Simpson, although many types of evidence were in the crime scene, especially blood. The blood of O.J. Simpson was there, and the blood of the victims were there. So it was, if this case would be today, definitely it would be easy to show that O.J. Simpson did the crime because his blood was in the scene, and by DNA we could confirm that he was there. So 15 years later, in this case of the killing of the Osherenko family, 6-member family were killed, we found in the crime scene this T-shirt which had the stains of blood of the 6 family members, in addition to a biological sample of the criminal that did this crime. So this shirt actually is the main evidence to show that the criminal was there because his DNA is on this shirt in the inner side of the shirt. Those sample is from the skin of this criminal, Demian, his name, and the stains, the blood stains are from the 6 family members. So the 7 profiles DNA were found on this shirt, and this was clear that who did this crime. So how we analyze or how we look into DNA results. If we look at the upper line, we see numbers. So this is the natural forensic ID of a person, right? And of a sample that was found in the crime scene, a biological sample. So it doesn't matter what kind of cell you find, all cells have the same DNA. So in the crime scene, we find a biological sample that has these kind of numbers, 22, 23, 7, 9, etc. Those numbers belong to the finding that we see in the DNA. The first number is from either the mother or the father, and the second one is also from the mother or father. So we have pairs of numbers, and those numbers represent the ID of the natural ID of a person. So if we find in the crime scene a sample that has the profile 23, 24, etc., and we have 2 suspects or many suspects, we have to compare the numbers, that's it. And the numbers must fit exactly. So it means if we look at the suspect 1 has all numbers exactly as in the crime scene. It means that he is probably the person that was and left this biological sample in the crime scene. Suspect 2 has only partial comparison to the crime scene, and he is not a part of this crime. So how this DNA started? This started in '86, okay, just 30 years or 40 years ago, where during the DNA analysis, which starts with a cell, any cell has the same DNA in the body. So any cell in the body has the same DNA. There is also another type of DNA, which is a mitochondrial DNA, but I will not discuss it at this time. This is less important. The DNA are chains of nucleotides that contain about 3 billion nucleotides. So the diversity can be very high, and this diversity can or is very individual to each person. So during the gene mapping, okay, it was found that about 95% of the DNA is not useful DNA. It's not translating into functional materials like proteins, okay? But they have a different role. Now, within this 95% of unused or unknown function of DNA, it was found a very very unique phenomenon that each person has an ID, okay? It means that there are some repeats of nucleotides that are very typical to each person. So if we look at one site, let's say the STR, very short repeat of the upper person, we see that he has 10 repeats probably from the mother. And he may have 20 repeats from the father. If we go to the next person, a lady, she has, at the same place in the DNA, 14 repeats from the father, and maybe 20 repeats from the mother. And the third one has only 5 repeats at the same place. So if we take these kind of numbers for about 10 sites in the DNA, we can say that the probability that a person will have 10, 12, 7, etc. in one collection is very rare. So how we make the calculation? Or first of all, where we find these sites along the DNA in many places in the DNA. So it is very diverse, which confirm the high probability of this technology. So the technology today is fully automated. So a sample can be taken either from a bone, from semen, from saliva, from blood, and processed automatically to get eventually the profile, which are the numbers that I mentioned before. So how a typical profile looks like, it's a collection of numbers, or you can see here peaks. XY means that this is a male, and the number 17, 18, it means that it has 17 repeats from the mother or father, 18 repeats from the mother or father, and then in the next location, it has only 13 and 14, etc. So if we take these kind of numbers, okay, the probability that you have such a number from 1 to 12, okay, from 2 to 12 or something like this, the probability to have the same person, to have the same DNA is 1 in several billion or many, many billions, which means that the probability to have the same DNA for 2 people is impossible, okay? So all the people in the world have a different profile of DNA. So if we find a DNA, a sample, a biological sample in a crime scene that has a certain profile and it fits one profile of a certain suspect, this is the suspect, okay? It means that he left the DNA there. Now we have to find out why he left. He has to justify why his DNA or biological sample was left there. So, but this is not enough. We need to compare it. So if we find in a crime scene or we developed the profile, now we have to compare it to someone, either to a suspect or suspects that we have, or to a database. And today we have a database of the DNA of the people that that were associated with a certain type of crime according to the law. So this is the way how we develop the DNA database. We ask the suspect to open his mouth, take a sample, and process this sample, and eventually we get a set of numbers, which this is the number that is representing the certain person. The mitochondrial DNA, I don't want to discuss it, but it was raised recently, I think mistakenly, in the news. The use of mitochondrial DNA is much less relevant to the DNA that we know from the nuclei DNA. This can only reject and say, okay, this person was not in the crime scene, but it cannot say anything about the probability that this person was or another person was in the crime scene. So what else we can learn from the DNA? And this is a development from recent years, that we can take the DNA and look into the functional DNA and find out the eye color, the hair color, the skin color, nose size, nose shape, and many other characteristics that can provide us a profile or the composite of the face of a certain person that we find his or her biological sample in the crime scene. So there is a company today that is providing these kind of services, and it is available worldwide. The only issue is the ethical issues, privacy issues, and legal issues that needs to be settled. And today, this is less of an issue because when we find a sample in a biological sample in a crime scene, it doesn't belong to anyone, okay, yet. But we hope that one day we can associate this sample to a certain person. But at this point, we can develop and find out the profile or the face of this person. So we can determine, okay, by certain gene analysis, the color of skin, the color of face, and many other items that are relevant for producing a composite, a facial composite for a certain suspect that may commit this crime. And this is already used in 2011. It was used already to find the suspect by this kind of composite. So I would like to end up with a work that we have done recently by Eti Buchnik. She completed her master's here. And one of the issues that we have with regard to a new technology that is coming in, that during with time, the lawyers try to find some defects in the technology and deteriorate the technology when it comes to court. But this didn't happen to the DNA. The DNA analysis is solid and fixed. So if we look over the years, from 2012, actually we doubled the laboratory, and this was the reason that there is an increase in the use of DNA analysis. We see that over the years, it almost remained the same. It means that in court, the DNA is a useful evidence or fixed evidence for criminals. Unfortunately, not all criminals leave their biological sample in the crime scene. It happens only about in 10% of the cases, but in major crimes, there is a high probability that we can find a sample. The problem is the biological samples are not visible, except for blood and saliva. We have some tests to find, or color tests, but for other types of tissues, we don't have this, and this is one of the challenges for the DNA analysis or DNA finding in a crime scene. So I would like to summarize that forensic DNA provides new efficient tools for fighting crimes. It's not questionable in court, and forensic science is the most effective barrier against wrongful convictions or release This is also important, okay? We want that all criminals will stay under bars. Thank you very much.